Perfect.
Okay, we're good to go. We're rolling. So why don't you go first then, Cheryl, and we'll see how this goes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Cheryl Burris, and you are going to be asked you're going to be asked to take part in a study on streaming environments to understand how engagement happens through digitally based social learning. You'll be asked several questions about online interaction. The interview should take about 15 minutes of your time. Do you have that much time for me tonight?
I do. Thank you so much for asking.
Absolutely. So here's my first question. What kind of experiences do you have regarding digitally based social learning via streaming environments such as Twitch TV?
So I actually watched when they had Bob Ross. They put Bob Ross after he passed away. They actually had Twitch streams with him on there. And it was really interesting because they not only had Bob Ross on the side, but then they had this chain of comments that were talking about what Bob was doing, about painting techniques, sharing their own artwork. It was this really collaborative environment, which I'd never seen before. It was interesting to see the applications of if he was still alive, if he would be taking part in that. And it was a very friendly stream overall. I've seen ones where they have a Twitch stream kind of following someone who's playing a game and showing off like expert level techniques and things like that. It's kind of, in my experience, it's either been like more educational or more entertainment based with a slight educational component to it. But that's been more of my background with Twitch until we did the Japanese woodblock kind of part of the experiment here.
Well, that's pretty awesome, especially the fact that there's a Bob Ross Twitch. I have to find this now. I can remember him. So that I can definitely see why that would be interesting. What are the conditions within the streaming environment that assisted you to be able to fully engage in that social learning?
I think with the streamers, in the chat for Bob Ross, the ones that kind of explained the technique or what he had done or shared more of like what I had missed. So I came into the stream probably like halfway through it. So being able to see kind of getting caught up with that helped quite a bit. And then also just whenever you go on these streams, there's a whole community and culture that has developed for people that keep coming back to the same channels. So kind of being able to see how the chat functioned, what their culture was, what their jokes were, I think that really gave me like an overall picture of kind of like the social learning environment and kind of how that little unique Twitch ecosystem worked.
Yeah, it's very much its own ecosystem. I will agree with you there. It's a little bit of catch up you have to do, so that's awesome. So I want you to consider this as you answer the next couple questions. So if there is an interaction spectrum, and on one end we have no interaction, and then on the other end we have full interaction, if you were to think about that spectrum and you were the streaming host, so whatever you want to educate people on, describe how much interaction you would have with your viewers on that, and then why.
Okay, that's a very good question. I think for me, I would be on the heavier end of the interaction. I think I would be more of full interaction, I would say, maybe like 3/4 of the way there. And I think the reason why I would do that is because Twitch, in my opinion at least, is sort of built to have that relationship, to facilitate that relationship between the streamer, myself in this case, and my audience. So I want to be engaged with them. I want to figure out what they're interested in that I'm doing so that I can not just increase my views, but to engage more with them. So if, for example, I'm walking them through a video game that I really enjoy and they enjoy whenever I show off, you know, what I think the story is, or, you know, behind the scenes trivia, we'll say, if that's what they're more interested to, that lets me know that's the kind of content I should be creating. And yeah, I think to ignore the chat, I would say, and to participate less in it is missing out on a big principal function of Twitch.
Mm-hmm. And that principal function is, I think, extremely important because that's what makes it social.
Exactly.
So that's an awesome thought. Now, switch your thinking. So again, on that interaction spectrum, what about if you were the viewer? Describe how much interaction you should have with the streaming host and why.
Yeah. Now, this is the funny thing, because as a viewer, I would be much more personally on the lower end of that. I've always been a classic like lurker on the forums. I'm reading what other people are writing, but I'm very content usually to not engage, because especially with Twitch, coming into these streams and really like for the Bob Ross stream, not knowing the culture, I didn't want to ask the wrong question, or I kind of felt like I was playing some catch up. So as a viewer, I think I would participate. I would be more on the no interaction side until I learned more of the culture and felt like I was a part of this social group. Then I think I would slowly move towards more interaction once I was more familiar with the streamer.
Gotcha. And that makes total sense. I think regardless of whether it's digital or out in the real world, it's kind of the same, thing from what I hear you saying.
Exactly.
So final question.
Okay.
Is there anything else you would like to add or discuss regarding your feelings, experiences, perspectives about engaging in a digitally based social learning environment?
Yeah, I think from looking at that Japanese woodblock video, even I thought it was interesting to see just how different streams can be. Some streams, I don't even know how they concentrate on what they're doing, because they're constantly. There was one stream I watched where every so often it would say like, congratulations, this person has been a member, has subscribed to your stream for a month or 2 months or 2 years, and that would pop up on the screen. There was the chat bar on the side. People were donating money, that was popping up, and at the whole time this person's also playing, I think in this case it was a video game. So I am really interested to kind of see not just how that engagement changes between different streamers, but I would like to down the road see more maybe research or information on how do people juggle 4 or 5 different things at the same time, because I feel completely incapable of doing that. And I think the other question I would have is, what can we take from these people that can multitask and can manage a community while doing something at a high level? What can we learn? What can we take from that and bring into more of a training environment, learning environment as well?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So here's a good task for you then, based on that. Master it and then do a Twitch on how to be on Twitch.
That's a very good point. I never thought of that.
Because someone like me will watch your Twitch and then we're like, all right, we got it. But that's awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you doing this interview.
Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate you, inviting me onto the show here.
Absolutely.
Now.
Okay.
Yes. Now, do we do the critique now, or do we do that at the end, do you think?
I think let's go ahead and do it now, and then that way we can focus solely on yours. Does that work okay for you?
I'm just bringing up the questions.
Okay. Yeah, the first question was, how open-ended are the questions?
Yeah, I thought your questions were pretty open-ended. I felt like they gave me a real wide kind of playground to participate in, as well as, especially your last question there, it really allowed me to not just like offer an opinion, but then to kind of connect that opinion to other observations that I came to throughout your questions. So I thought they were good. There was nothing that I would ever be like, no, like in terms of like just shutting down the question. I thought they were compelling, especially when you're kind of looking at more of like asking me as a streaming host, how would I approach this? That really puts me in a space where I'm actually like, oh, okay, what would I do with that? Because what I would do as a viewer is so different than what I would do as a streamer.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. The second question, how would these questions make for a compelling interview?
So yeah, I think along with asking about being a streaming host, I think the other thing that I really enjoyed was too is, how do you fully engage in social learning? I think that question too really makes me think, what techniques are these streamers doing? What have I seen that I kind of took away from all this? And having seen kind of 3 different, very, very different streaming environments, that also really makes me kind of think and kind of connect those ideas together. Because yeah, the thing with Twitch is that when it first came out, I kind of thought nothing of it, and then it became this huge thing. But for me, it was always more about of an entertainment aspect. This class is really, in this interview, has helped kind of show what else it can do besides entertainment. What are the social learning outcomes it can kind of produce?
Excellent. And final question: what other considerations should be made? So I'm guessing about these questions.
That's a good question. So the tough thing with these is that we both, I think, are sort of on the same wavelength as we go through this interview process here. Other considerations, I mean, the only thing I could really think of is if you maybe had an additional question that maybe delved into a different angle of this. The tough thing for me to kind of critique this is I really like that about halfway through you offer that spectrum of answers. Mm-hmm. So that they're really, that opens up the interview even more and allows me to kind of figure out how I more granularly figure out how I feel about certain issues with that. So I guess if you could have one more question relating to streaming, maybe something that has to do with, where do you see the future of it going, or in your aspect, is it an effective, collaborative social tool and things like that? But yeah, I mean, I think I'm nitpicking at this point.
No, but that's an awesome piece to consider, because addressing the future of it is not one thing that I looked at. I looked at it as like, what's happening right now, probably because I'm still trying to figure out, well, what's happening right now. So my questions are reflective of my thinking. I think that's an awesome thing for me as a interviewer to, expand past where I'm at to try and understand where the other person is at.
And that's the crazy thing, is that like I'm in the same boat, trying to wrap my head around it, because I read an article about how a new video game came out, and the company that made the game paid like one of the biggest Twitch streamers $1 million to stream this game exclusively over the first weekend it launched. And the game, because of that, partly took off and did really well. So like there are people who make millions off this per year, whereas for me, I'm like, oh, they put old Bob Ross episodes on it, So it's how I view Twitch and how it actually operates. There's a huge gulf between that. So that's the only reason why I thought of that.
Yeah, I'm excited because, oh, wow, there's a Bob Ross channel. I got to find that, So I'm at the very beginning of the novice. I'm not even to this zero yet, because I'm still trying to like figure it out. So awesome. Well, thanks for that feedback, because that feedback is valuable. I find that critique very constructive and kind of like an aha moment. So I appreciate that.
Now, do you have a moment to be interviewed, Cheryl?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let me set the stage here.
Okay.
So you're being asked to take part in a study on live streaming media platforms like Twitch to understand how online engagement is affected through communication and audience participation and observation. Nice and wordy. You will be asked several questions about your own experiences, as well as with live streaming platforms. This will probably just take about 15 minutes here. So my first question for you is, in your experience, how does a streamer behave when being observed by their audience?
Okay, so this answer will have two parts to it, so bear with me. The first part is I can only make observations because I've never hosted. So the second part will be about if I put myself in that mind space, because I have done a lot of teaching and a lot of demonstrations, like how has that impacted me, and how would I kind of transfer possibly that into a hosting environment. So as a host, I have no idea, but I would have to think initially there may be a little bit of self-consciousness, because it's do they see me? Do they understand what's happening? Am I relating this technique? So thinking back to the Japanese woodblock, am I explaining this correctly? Or am I getting their information correctly? So I think in the beginning, there will probably be some anxiety about hosting, and because of that, it would kind of change that natural flow and interaction. I think as the interview would go along, my behavior would probably become more personable, and maybe even depending on if there's certain people that I see signing on, okay, and I know them, and they've kind of let their personality show in the chat, then I may be able to kind of tailor or individualize a little bit of what I'm saying back to the, hey, Devin, remember last time we did this, I goofed this up. Well, I fixed that because I bought this little thing and it really helps me. And this, I'm going to show you what I do with this now. So I think there might be some way to personalize interaction once the stream would go along. But I see that interaction being not silent, but kind of a mix of, the quiet, steady talking, because I'm thinking about like if I was doing a cooking demonstration, because you may not know this, but I'm also a chef. So, being a military wife, I have multiple lives. So I'm thinking about if I was demonstrating something, some cooking technique. So in that demonstration, if I'm really focusing on the technique, I might not initially say anything as I'm doing it, but then afterwards, that's where the interaction would come in. Be like, okay, guys, let me tell you the insider secret to doing this. This is how we cut, 100 cherry tomatoes all at one time, So I would do it and then I would explain it, and probably as I went along, then that would be a little more natural, a little more flowing, and I would probably be able to explain as I do things. So I think the interaction changes over time. And I think for me, if I was the host or the streamer, my interaction would probably grow more personable as I got more comfortable with it. Because I think that's kind of the key is, am I comfortable with what I'm doing? Am I comfortable with the environment that I'm doing it in? And am I comfortable, with those that I'm interacting with? So I think those are the three things that I would really have to account when being observed by my audience, because I want to get it right.
Well, and it's interesting too, because you mentioned all these different, lives you've had in careers, and being a teacher as well. I know there's a difference between being observed by your students and being observed by strangers on the internet. When you were being observed, like let's say by your students there, how did your behavior change when you were more like in a work environment or casual environment?
Yeah. When I was interacting with students, it was more personable, relaxed, kind of jovial, like, oh my goodness, guys, this is why I should not teach penmanship, because look at my handwriting, right this month, we could do stuff on a smartboard. However, when I was doing cooking demonstrations and I did not know the people, I was very stiff in the beginning because it was oh crap, everybody's looking at me right this moment. Mm-hmm. So there's that mental space you have to navigate that, I can't necessarily be as personable with people that I know as I can be with people that I don't know. So that would be a good challenge for me to try and discover how personable I could be with people I don't know, and not really knowing how many people are looking at me at that moment.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. It's like you have to engage with strangers, but you don't know them necessarily. And then once you eventually kind of make more of that connection, I guess, that my question is sort of like, what level of detail and engagement do you really need? Like, what's optimal for that? How much detail engagement do you need in a streaming environment or just in these casual environments?
Yeah, I think that would really depend on what I was doing. So I'll use, if it was some of the other, like making a sauce, some sauces are very simple. So if I was doing a technique, I'd be like, all right, guys, you have to do a roux. If I've already taught how to do a roux, I wouldn't necessarily engage a whole lot while I'm making a roux, because that's something that is foundational at this point. However, if I was taking that to, take it up a level and change that roux into something else, move it from the basis and then actually turn into a sauce, there'd probably be a lot more conversation, interaction, and discussion, but it would be more professionalized, formalized, unless I make a mistake and then I'm going to laugh at myself and make a bad joke. And then that's going to become like the thing of the chat, but then it automatically gets turned back to kind of that professional interaction. So
it's kind of, so complexity plays a role though. The more complex the task may be.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a very good way to put it. The more complex, the more professional it is, the more routine, the more casual it is.
I like that.
The better job I do, the more casual I might be. The more I kind of catch myself, or I'm getting self-conscious, kind of the quieter, the more professional I would probably get. So.
Okay. That makes sense.
But again, that's hard because I've never hosted. So that's all supposition.
Yeah, okay, well, I like that. You're like, don't hold me to this. So kind of going into this. So in those moments where maybe you're feeling more casual and loose and you can joke around or go more off book, how does one engage deeply with the audience or chat without overstepping those boundaries or losing concentration at the task at hand? And you've covered sort of losing concentration. Maybe you would wait until the task was done to explain it. But what about overstepping boundaries?
I don't know. That one.
So I guess kind of rephrasing this a little bit too is, so in the case of your when you're teaching your classes there, let's say cooking classes, let's say when if you're teaching people that, where is the line between maybe kind of joking about your own cooking failures, but maybe trying to be more sensitive to people who are just learning to cook, maybe joking about their failures? How do you kind of figure out and read the audience, or whether it's chat or physically?
Well, I will say this. When it comes to joking about failures, I will joke about my failures all day long because I can laugh at myself, and I get very tickled at some of the stuff I've done. However, when it comes to someone else's failure, if someone pops up on a chat like, yeah, I honestly set the house on fire when I tried doing this because my pan was hot, I would relate to that because people never need to feel alone. But then, so I don't think that's overstepping, but one thing I would not do was make them the center of the joke. It would be turned back to, oh, really? You think you burned down the house? Well, let me tell you one time, not to one up you, but I can relate to it, kind of thing. So I think a host would really have to be really careful to ensure that whoever is, because even though you can't see them, there's still people on the other side of that chat. So if they're going to be vulnerable enough to kind of put out something out there, treat that with respect. Mm-hmm. And not make them the butt of the joke, or the issue or the problem, or unless they ask specific questions, and then kind of maybe that I think you have to play kind of by ear.
I think it's an interesting approach, because if you do it that way, you are still the host. It is still you're still relating it back to you, and you're kind of keeping the audience members in that kind of predefined role there, which I think that works.
And I think that's important, because as long as you're the host and you remember that, you're also going to kind of take control of that.
Exactly.
And you can't if you've got a viewer, you can't let them walk away feeling like, well, that was a waste of my time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we talk about, we saw the Japanese woodblock stream. There's Bob Ross. There's all kinds of streams. Where do you see live streaming and the relationship between the streamer and viewers in the future, 10 years from now? And how do you think that relationship might evolve? Because television used to be very much a one-way street, and now with live streaming, it's very collaborative there.
I don't know. I am having a hard time with that because of having to wrap my brain around what's happening right now. So, my brain might not be as elastic as it should be to expand to what it could be. But I would have to think that I think AI is going to play into this somehow. How yet, I don't know. I'm not sure if, maybe it would be like on the Japanese woodblocks where they had, I think it was like the bot that would send automatic responses. I think kind of maybe a level above that, where there's almost like an AI assistant somehow that.
Okay.
So where on the Japanese woodblock one, there was the guy who was the assistant who was reading stuff and relaying it. I can almost see where there is like an AI assistant on screen that may be pointing something out or bringing attention to something or sending information that's historical to the people who are chatting. But and in that AI complex would also be able to act as a translator. So right now I'm speaking English, but maybe someone from Finland who doesn't speak English can watch my show. The AI is translating me in real time as I speak, so that person can hear and understand. So
I love that.
That's kind of how I see, but I I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it would be hologram or something silly like that. Yeah, it's not going to be so 2D. It'll be a little more 3D. You know,
But,
it'll be something that could be projected and they see me chopping or whatever.
I do like the idea though, instead of having an assistant, having you know, more advanced AI kind of bot there who's doing more of the mid and low level explanations, freeing up the streamer to do more of what they're doing, their expertise, as well as being able to engage more of a global audience there. Because yeah, if there weren't, if that woodblock stream was in Japanese, it would have made no sense whatsoever. So
Yeah.
I like that a lot. So, and when we get to the critique part, there is one thing I'll ask you here, if you want to. But thank you so much, Cheryl, by the way, for your time here.
Those are awesome questions. Thank you for inviting me to answer. I know in trying to process it, sometimes my divergent thinking will examine a question, but I try to eventually come back around.
You did great. You did great. Because I mean, the thing is, I don't even know, until we had to do this assignment, I had no opinion on Twitch besides like, oh, that's interesting, you know. So this has really made me think about what it can do and just about Twitch in general. But so how, in your opinion, how open were the questions then?
I thought your questions were awesome because they really spurred thought. And they were questions that even if I didn't have direct experience with that, they were translatable to experiences that I had, so I felt comfortable answering them.
Okay. I feel like I lucked out with you because you had a bunch of different experiences to pull on, because both of us don't have like any Twitch experience practically.
Yeah.
So that was very helpful.
That was very helpful. But I would say this, having the Japanese woodblock experience in common first, or even if we didn't have, you know, that one in common, but having that in common first was very helpful.
I absolutely agree. What now? So would these questions make for a compelling interview?
Yes, I definitely think these questions make for a compelling interview. Namely because the one thing that you kept addressing was experience and engagement. And I think that's really important to think about, not from just the giving side, but also from the receiving side. So your questions compelled me to kind of think about those things. How does this occur, and what makes good engagement? What makes a good experience? You know, and I think that's important, because why else would we do this kind of stuff? You know, if it's not engaging, if it's not compelling, if it's not good, what's going to bring someone back to it? What's someone going to learn from it? And yours really focused in on helping that. I
think it's a great point too that you make, where if Twitch wasn't engaging, it wouldn't be a thing. So there's something there that we're
there's something.
What other considerations should be made? I have one. I can throw right off the bat to you.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me think about that in just a second.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came up to me during this interview that I think could be expanded upon would just be at the very end saying, at the end of all this, would you ever stream? You know, based on your experiences and how you feel about things, because I think that's the one thing, is that we can say about all the good it does, but will that motivate us to actually participate in that?
Mm-hmm.
But what other considerations can be made in your opinion?
Or if we do stream or do host, how can that be made more interactive? Or because I think the interaction piece, I don't think it's enough just to be a fly on the wall. Exactly. Yeah, I think one of the opportunities that something like Twitch has is that interaction and engagement between people who are chat, like we saw in the Japanese woodblock one, but also is it that and I'm kind of at a loss right this moment because I'm trying to formulate what I'm thinking, but it's like, how do you take that engagement and make the engagement more compelling? And that's not something you and I can sit here and answer necessarily. And I think that's the thing that I struggled with on mine is, you know, between the fly on the wall, between being a voyeur and completely interactive, where on that spectrum does engagement occur?
Well, you've sparked an idea though, because especially with cooking, you know, managing cooking classes, if you could have a live stream with, you know, a world famous chef, and maybe to make it more interactive, you were in some kind of environment with camera set up where that chef could see what you're doing, and they can collaborate, they can kind of collaboratively check on your progress, show you techniques, kind of check in with everybody essentially there.
That would be awesome. So kind of like a master class where it's not just you watching the instructor, but the instructor's also watching you.
Exactly.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I think that's an awesome thing.
So that's the only thing. But I mean, again, it's so tough because, like you said, it can go AI, it can go holograms. I mean, there's so many places to take this technology, and I have no idea at this point. But
I have no idea. My grandkids hopefully will figure that out for me.
Well, yeah, thanks, Cheryl, for the interview here. I think we're good. I think we can probably stop the recording, but we can continue chatting here.
Thank you so much for doing that, Devin.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll post it I'll show you the upload when it's all done.
That's fine.